Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Monique Akassi, and today we will be talking about writing a literacy narrative for freshman English composition courses in college. Writing a literacy narrative is a wonderful writing that many freshmen are required to write. And I highly recommend there are a lot of great textbooks out there. I'll be referencing this lecture today from Dr. Richard Bullock's The Norton Field Guide to Writing. To begin, what exactly is a literacy narrative? Well, by definition, a literacy narrative is a well-told story that focuses on a specific incident or incidents that happened in your life that led to your overall views, particularly about reading and or writing. Now, literacy narratives over the years have expanded into even dealing with perhaps public speaking, or even dealing with building websites or blogs and so forth. But overall, again, we're dealing with a well-told story with the literacy narrative. Now, within the literacy narrative, we want to keep in mind that there are key features associated with the literacy narrative. Key features for a literacy narrative include, as I mentioned before, it should be a well-told story. And this well-told story should include vivid details and some indication of the narrative's overall significance. So we always want to make sure that we also include dialogue, conversations that happen within the narrative. And the reason for that is because dialogue, conversations can help bring life to the narrative, and it can also move the narrative along even more smoothly. We also want to make sure that we include vivid details to key people, key places, spaces, if you will, within the narrative. You know, for example, what did the teacher look like? What did the room look like when you went into the writing class for the first time? What were the smells? You always want to make sure you hit on the different sensories with that. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you taste? What did you touch? And again, this applies mostly to significant people or places that surround the incident or incidents within the literacy narrative. And then, of course, you always want to keep in mind, what is the overall significance for the literacy narrative? What is the overall lesson to be learned? Or perhaps, or was it an issue that needed to be resolved? Was there a solution at the end, or did it end as a call for action? Also, literacy narratives, they can begin as a problem that needs to be resolved. In the introduction paragraph, sometimes we start off more general, and we keep it problematic, if you will. And then the body paragraphs build up towards the end and the conclusion to see, was this issue resolved in the end? Literacy narrative in the introduction paragraph will usually be set up as an upside down triangle, almost like Greek philosopher Aristotle's deduction technique, where we may start off with something general and then we apply it to something specific and cause one to come to a generalized conclusion without even saying it. Now, within the introduction paragraph with the literacy narrative, again, it may start off as a problem that needs to be resolved. And this will hook the reader from the beginning. So you may even begin with controversial issues have been raised over the past 5 to 10 years regarding the impact that writing courses have on teenagers' lives or the youth's lives. I particularly have experienced positive, and you have to decide, are you going to move positively or negatively with your experiences with it? So for example, I personally have experienced many obstacles with writing courses throughout my education journey, if you will. And so you can start off that way, starting off general and then zooming in more narrow. Now, also keep in mind with the literacy narrative that you want to include a thesis statement if you can. Remember, a thesis statement is usually the last sentence or close to the last sentence in an introduction paragraph that basically lets the audience, the reader, know what the overall narrative will be about. For example, one thesis statement towards the end of your introduction paragraph could be possibly my negative experiences in elementary school, comma, middle school, comma, and high school have all contributed to my challenges with writing over the years. When you do that, people will know, the reader will know, okay, so they use a 3-part thesis statement, so I know that they're going to be perhaps talking in the body paragraphs about an incident that happened in elementary school, an incident that happened in middle school, and an incident that happened in high school that all contributed to these negative experiences or obstacles with writing courses. And so with that being said, when you're writing the narrative, it's almost like, in some ways, being an attorney in some ways, meaning you need to stick with, are you going to focus on positive or negative experiences with reading or writing or speaking or technology, if you will. Choose one. You don't want to flip-flop back and forth and say, oh, in elementary school, positive, but middle school, negative, and then high school, positive. You want to either, you're defending or prosecuting. And so there are a plethora of examples that you can use, surely, right? But what you want to do is focus on a specific incident and show a pattern within with the reader of these incidents that have all contributed to this overall conclusion. And when we do that, Aristotle's technique called the induction technique. So in the body paragraphs, the induction technique is when you use specific examples that force an audience to come to a generalized conclusion. So a specific incident that happened in elementary school, specific incident that happened in middle school, a specific incident that happened in high school, all have this connection of either positive or negative. So you have to choose, okay? In addition to that, you may be wondering, okay, well, how do I want to organize my literacy narrative? Well, there are several ways you can do it. Of course, again, as I mentioned before, you can focus on 3 different incidents. You could also focus on one major incident that happened in your life. And if you do that, you may want to start what happened at the beginning, what happened at the middle, and then what happened at the end. Another technique you can use is if you start at the end, and you see movies do this sometimes too, where you may start at the end and then work your way back to the beginning. And then some people start their literacy narratives where they jump right into the climax or right into the middle of the incident. And then they may do a flashback to the beginning and then move towards the end. So you could either do a organization style with your literacy narrative where you tell what happens at the beginning, middle, end, or start with the end first, followed by the middle, and then the beginning. You could do it that way, or you can start right in the middle and then flash back to the beginning and then end with the conclusion. So overall, literacy narrative is a wonderful, reflective piece, well-told story. You want to bring life to it. Keep in mind that you, as the writer, you are the ultimate artist, the ultimate creator of how we perceive this narrative, the story that you're telling. It's not a picture book, so we won't be able to see these people or see these places. We have to depend exclusively on your descriptions that you provide to these key people in these key places. This is very, very important. And then again, the overall significance for the narrative, this will always be at the end of the narrative in your conclusion. So in the concluding paragraph, you will always restate the overall issue from the beginning. So you can refer back to that thesis statement. You can refer back to, although I had issues or obstacles in elementary school, comma, middle school, comma, and high school regarding my writing, to this day, I still